Please can you remind me if you'll be so kind, staring out into space, asking God to hear my case, trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? The purple angel, purple angel, purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, welcome everyone to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm thrilled to be with you today, and our guest today is Damian Murphy, who is over in the UK. But before we get into our line of questions, we always have new listeners, and so I always like to tell people a little bit about Alzheimer Speaks. Bottom line, I am the founder of it, and Alzheimer Speaks was created due to my own mother having dementia for 30 years. Changed my life, changed my careers, and here I am. So we really are an advocacy-based company, trying to provide multiple platforms to shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort around the world. We're also known as a media outlet due to all of our different platforms to help raise, again, the voices of all regarding this disease. We totally believe that by joining forces and sharing knowledge and just having these simple, authentic, everyday kind of coffee clutch conversations is how we are going to move the needle when it comes to dementia, helping raise awareness, remove stigmas, and give people new resources to use. At our core, we also believe that collaboration is the only way that we're going to win this battle against dementia. And I know that that is working because you see, every time you like or share one of Alzheimer Speaks platforms, if it's the radio show, if it's our Dementia Chats interviews, if it's the blog, the website, an event we're pushing out, you are raising awareness by doing that. You are opening the door to many people who feel isolated and who are feeling a little bit lost. And so I encourage you to continue to do that because, again, it's all about us working together. And through your efforts and ours, that got us named the #1 influencer online, according to ShareCare and Dr. Oz. Maria Shriver acknowledged us as the architect of change. And just recently, I was recognized by Oprah Winfrey as a health hero for 2018. And again, I don't take those accolades myself. I share them with all of you because it's us together who have really raised the voice and gotten things known and expanded. I'd also like to invite you to be a guest. So if you're living with dementia and want your story told, maybe you're caring for somebody, maybe you are a business professional that's come up with some type of tool or service, maybe you're an author, a singer, a songwriter, a movie director, an advocate, a researcher, you are all welcome. So just reach out to me and we'll have a conversation about having you on the show and sharing what's important about dementia and giving care in your eyes. Before I get into our conversation and our interview with Damian, I do have to give a shout out to the Call Alert Center for Caregivers, which is just an incredible service. It's under $15 a year, plus you can get 20% off if you put in our promo code. But in case somebody would go wandering, they basically set up a social media blitz and work with the police. And it's something you can do ahead of time so you don't have to worry and be frantic when a situation has already gone haywire on you. They also, you can use this system for pets, you can use it for kids, you can use it for people who travel. So it's not just limited to dementia. There is on our website, alzheimerspeaks.com, they actually placed a video on there that will explain it in a little bit more detail. Also want to give a shout out to the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation. They are just dear to my heart. they work on a real holistic mode. So, what we eat, how we move, meditation, all of those types of things. Do a lot of education for that. Want to give a shout out to Maria Shriver for her work in creating the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, which is known as WAM. She also does the Move for Minds, which will be coming up in probably this summer, and that has to do with fitness, and they also do kind of a panel situation in several different states around the country. And then the American Senior Magazine is just really a fun magazine that's got large print that I don't even have to wear my glasses to read, which is nice. They have great articles, plus they have an activities program within the magazine itself, which is pretty cool. And last, I just want to make a comment. I saw that Pfizer has stopped all of its research for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's treatment, and my heart, it just kind of is sad about that. They were such a force in the industry, and at this time apparently they're just feeling that it's not meeting their corporate needs, and hopefully they will change their mind and come back, because we do need to find a cure for this disease. With that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Damian Murphy, who sits to my side here. He has 20 years of experience in acute and community and long-term settings with people with dementia. He has created the Getting Along program, which is relationship-centered, which I absolutely love those words, because I have been fighting the whole term person-centered, because I really think it is about being relationship-centered. So I can't wait to talk with you further about that. He is also co-facilitates the York Mind of Voices and the Deep Group, which is a group of peers living with dementia and forming a part of the growing UK network of the Dementia Voices, which is pretty cool. So this man's got a lot to say and a lot to educate us on, and I'm just thrilled. I'm thrilled to have you on the show, Damian. Thank you for taking this time out.
Thank you, Laurie. Not a problem. Happy New Year to you.
Well, Happy New Year to you as well. One of the things I always ask everybody before I kind of get into our basic line of questions is, have you been personally touched by dementia in your own family or circle of friends?
Not in my family, no, but obviously lots of friends, neighbours, and obviously many people I work with, but not personally in my own family. So I've got all the theory, but I've no idea how I'd react if it happened in my family, Yep.
And it is interesting how we do react different when it hits home. Yeah. It just takes things back. I remember speaking at a conference one year, and there was a man sitting in the front row, and he just started sobbing hysterically as I was speaking. And I was, kind of looking at the table like, is he okay? What's going on? And somebody ran out, and they brought a roll of toilet paper back for him, because he just couldn't stop sobbing. And I talked with him after the talk, and he's like, I am so sorry. He's like, I'm so embarrassed. He's like, but I've been a nursing home administrator for 21 years, and I've been giving all kinds of advice, and my dad now has it. And everything I told people was wrong. He said, the approach has to be a little bit different. And so it was very interesting. And he and I talked, and, not everything he said was wrong, but in that moment, that's what he felt, and yet he was giving out great advice, but it just emotionally, it just impacted him so strongly. I want to ask you, Damian, what was the biggest thing, I guess, that struck you about working with families where one partner was living with a diagnosis of dementia?
Well, what really struck me about when I was working in the community setting, and I encountered people where the relationship dynamic had changed, and there were a lot of misunderstanding between a couple, but any caregiving relationship, but the relationships were very one-sided, And I often found myself wincing at sort of, you know, personal detractions that people were saying. And I know they weren't with ill intent, and I know it was full of the strong feeling. And but what I felt was a sense of unfairness, because the partner who might be able to respond normally was no longer as eloquent as they used to be, and couldn't. So relationships, what really struck me was this one-sided relation, or this lopsided relationship, really, that was present, and people were sort of falling into traps that dementia sets. I could understand why one party got really frustrated, but there was a sense of, I suppose, that what pervaded was a sense of blame. And often it was the person with dementia being blamed for their condition, and it's nobody's fault. And I think that's a real message that we often have to get out there, and people don't see that, and so this sense of blame prevailed. And I asked myself, why is blame always there? And I think there was this prevailing sort of stress and burden model historically, that sort of a lot of the organizations and a lot of the services that were out there. And I was working at the time for the Alzheimer Society, which itself in 1979 was founded as a carers organization. So traditional services were very much focused on one side of the relationship. And what really struck me was that the other side of the relationship had been neglected, and not through ill intent, but just through that well-meaning, and maybe that the carer's voice was perhaps more eloquent, and had got to sort of got herself a bit more organized, I suppose. So what really struck me was this: within relationships, people were struggling themselves. There was this blame. There was a real lopsided relationship, an imbalance in voice, choice, control that I could see, and I could see the reasons why, but the people I was visiting couldn't. And I looked at my own role, and I was there to help somebody with their benefits, or to monitor a service that I was running. That was what was on my agenda. But actually what people were screaming out to me, their agenda was, we're in trouble here, we're at each other's throats, we're rubbing each other up the wrong way, we're falling into all the traps, we don't want this. But nobody seemed to be attending that. So there were these unattended antagonisms, really, that were really sort of kept striking me, and I thought, I've got to do something about this.
Yeah. Well, and I like when you say that, you know, people kind of fall into the traps.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's easier to communicate with somebody who communicates like us, you know, to not, I mean, even just when you ask someone to just pause a few seconds to allow a person with dementia to gather their thoughts, they don't want to give them 7 seconds, you know. And I mean, that is just such a simple little thing to do, you know, just to pause, to be quiet. But we've been trained to feel so uncomfortable with that. And to judge that as a right or wrong. And I just, you know, one of the biggest things that that has touched me, I guess, through my journey of 30 years with my mom, and now in this role that I play, is the lessons dementia is teaching the world that are good for everybody in all cases. I mean, it's just, I have not seen anything that's good for dementia that isn't good for somebody else. You know, that it isn't respectful to somebody else. And so I don't know, on a spiritual level, I feel like this thing they call dementia, I think it's here to teach us a lesson to be kinder, to be patient, to remove some of the judgment and get back to being relationship centered. I think we've gotten away from that with our texting and our emails and our emojis that we think are all cute and quick and fast, but they're not very competent on a lot of levels. And, you know, in terms of how we communicate. So you gathered kind of all this data, and I can almost imagine how your insides were kind of bubbling with, how did everybody miss this before? You know, because when you're seeing it, it's so blatant. And I know for me, when I got into this realm, it was just like, how is this being missed? You know, this is just a pretty basic thing, you know, even coming from people not asking the person with the disease, what would you like? How would you like to live your life? I mean, that's just just so basic, and yet it wasn't being done, and I think it's still in a lot of cases still isn't being done. So what did you do once you gathered that? How did it change you?
Well, I thought I've got to stop. Well, so many times visiting the same couple, and often questioning the validity of decades of marriage they were.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there, and I thought, I've not done anything. I've not changed. I've ticked a box for my service provision, but I've not actually changed anything in their lives. And I need to address their priority, find out what's on their agenda. So I started asking the couples and said, I can see there's a bit of tension here. How about, would it be all right if I came back and we made an appointment and we just spoke about how you're getting along? Is sort of had the very first, and that's how I realized I would call it getting along. The very first time I asked somebody, how are you getting along? And I've always asked that ever since, really, over the last 10, 15 years, working with couples, that question. And people will talk about what matters to them, and people will open up about their relationships. Just not necessarily the nitty gritty, but just those little antagonisms that if you ask, is that something? Many people report this and many people report that. Oh yes, that's us too, and people want to talk about that, and yet services don't address that. So I thought I was studying at the time, so I thought I did a project on addressing this, really, on these unattended antagonisms. And I looked at all my cases and all the sort of the couples on my list, and I didn't have to go and revisit them. I knew them quite well. And of 30 odd people that I would be going to visit in the community, they all had at least, 10 or 12 what I would call different types, permutations of sort of unattended antagonisms, whether it was ignoring or belittling or infantilizing or just arguing and point scoring and each other, and blaming and all that sort of stuff. And it was always two sides. And I thought it was unnecessary. And I thought it was really draining to watch and to witness. And I thought, how much more draining must it be to live with for both sides? So I thought I need to do something. So I kept on seeing these things, and I grasped the nettle, said, right, can I come and talk with you about this? And I thought, and they said, yes. Yes, it's really good. Maybe we could get some top tips. And I spoke to another couple I knew, and they said, yes, absolutely. Although the wife who had dementia said, so long as he doesn't monopolize it all. And I said, that's exactly why I want to level the playing field, because I realize things do get monopolized one-sided. And so that lady said, yeah, okay, well, I'm in for it. And her husband said about his wife, he said, well, I'd be worried about saying things that upset her. And I said, well, I'm sure she'll tell you things as well when she gets the chance, because I knew many people with dementia hadn't got the chance to maybe have a quick retort as they may used to have done. And that got people were deciding, yeah, okay, we'll go for this. Because what was different when I looked at sort of a lot of the literature and how I might formulate the questions and how I might sort of structure these sessions with people, I wanted to talk with people together. So a lot of what I read, there was a lot of stuff about talking with people with dementia on their own and people with carers on their own, and they've got their benefits, that's absolutely fine. But what I wanted to look at was the sort of the dynamic of the relationship between couples. And I thought, well, if I ask a couple of questions and set them off talking and then see where we go from there. And that's what I did. And it proved quite fruitful, really. So I sort of, not thought up, I looked at a lot of them reading, a lot of the questions. The first question I thought was, well, okay, how do you describe each other? How do you get along? What's difficult now? Mm-hmm. So we got straight to the point about getting along. What are the difficulties about each other? So there was always a real offload from both parties on the first session. Usually the carer, who are the most eloquent, most used to doing that, grabbed that opportunity with great gusto. But that always fueled then the conversation, because I was then able to say, okay, thank you for your honesty. You've really offloaded there. And obviously in front of your partner. And I can say, gosh, that must be quite difficult to listen to. How was it for you? What do you feel about that? And suddenly the person with dementia got the chance to say, well, actually, and that was really, really useful. So one example was one chap said about his wife, gosh, she flies off the handle. She just has these outbursts. And I just don't understand them at all. And it drives me up the wall. And I asked his wife, okay, gosh, thank you for that. And I said, and how do you feel? What do you feel about that? And she said, I have to be like that, otherwise I'm nobody.
Oh,
Blew me away. and so it was a real opportunity, without the getting along intervention, without that conversation, just all I said was, and how do you feel?
mm-hmm.
It gave her the opportunity to say, look, there's a big issue around identity and existence, and
Mm-hmm.
who am I, and who am I within this relationship, and I need my space, and my behavior has meaning, it's not irrational. And so it was a really, really powerful moment when we were able to grasp that and hold on to that. And the husband was, blown away as well, so each sort of session had its little light bulb moment for various couples, and things seemed to work quite well, really, and people sort of tended to respond very well. People want to talk about what matters to them.
Yeah. Well, I think I know when I brought the memory cafes over to the US, I had such pushback because, like you, saying, well, we're supposed to separate. Everybody has to, have kind of their own time to blow off steam. And it's like, no, we have to help people live graciously together, and communicate better, the good, the bad, the ugly, because none of that's going away. It's always going to be there. So we have to give people permission to deal with it and give them tools. When we did the dementia friendly cruise, people are like, whoa, you can't have them together. You got to have respite. And I said, for who? And they're like, well, for the care partner, of course, and I'm like, well, they both need respite from one another. They both get tired of being tied to one another. And so, again, I said, that's not our goal, to separate. It's to bring them together. It's to get them connected to others who are going on the similar journey. And I've just been amazed. I think, like you have been, the openness, the authentic conversations, the willingness to look at things different and go, I didn't know they were looking at things like that, or it made them feel that way, or, oh gosh, I triggered that. It's a whole different ball of wax when you're able to do that. Damian's put together a great little 5-minute video of the program where he interviews couples, and you'll get a really good feel from their voice as well in terms of what this program, Getting Along, has meant in their lives. And it's pretty powerful stuff. You had mentioned, when we were talking earlier about you discovered that people were really open, to talking, and they seemed in the video to just be so thankful and calming, and you could see them holding hands, and just how important their relationship really was, and how thankful they were to you. That had to just kind of melt your heart in terms of helping put that piece of the puzzle together.
Yeah, no, obviously really, really nice to see that response, and nice to listen to. And it was just, I suppose my overwhelming feeling was desperate to share that, to let other people, give people the opportunity to talk. And we have services, and we have all sorts of, with dementia cafes and respite services, all this sort of thing, which do tend to separate people. Mm-hmm. But it was about equipping couples to live well where they spend most of the time, which is not in our services. It's at home. And one lady said to me, no one's spoken to us like this before. I go to all the events, the local sort of charity sort of events, the trips out, and the boat trips, and the walks, and the parties. We sign up for all that because, obviously we want to get as much support as possible. But actually, you're talking about us here at home, getting under each other's feet and not having to do that so much. And she says, why doesn't everyone get this? Was sort of the call, really, which was really nice to hear, but also frustrating because I want to share that as much as possible. You're right, the relationship is usually the most important thing, and often it helps people separate what might be down to the dementia and what might be an idiosyncrasy they married into in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that too, where the dementia gets blamed for something that's always been there. And, they say as we age, our characteristics get stronger. And it has nothing to do with the disease. It just it has to do with who we've always been.
Yeah.
And I love the one woman saying, learning to deal with what she has control of and letting go of what she doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think being able to have those conversations in an authentic way, because I think when people dance with these situations alone, I think a lot of times we have the same conversation with ourselves over and over and over again, but then you just get this third party, non-biased person that comes in, and it's like, oh, that makes sense. And it's not like they didn't know that before, but it's just different. It's taken seriously, and it's like, oh, I can do this a different way. I don't have to keep spinning in this same old cycle. And I think there might be a little bit of even accountability with it, having that outside person witnessing something so personal.
Yes, absolutely. And capturing that, and sometimes challenging things on the spot, any myths and misconceptions that one party might come out with. I found myself challenging that on the spot to make sure that there was that fairness, that level playing field. One chap in the first session said, she's got to accept she's got dementia. And on our final session, 4 or 5 weeks later, he said, he couldn't remember he'd said it in the first session, but he said, I've got to accept she's got dementia. And I thought and I reminded him that was, the journey he'd come on, if you want. And, that opportunity, as you say, to let people maybe put things in perspective, but also get some top tips, very small little things, but made a huge difference. One lady would get very frustrated. She'd go out into the hallway or to another room to look for something in a drawer. By the time she'd got to her drawers, she didn't know what she was looking for. She was rifling through things were getting untidy. She'd get really frustrated and crying and would still be unsettled. And I said, because you've forgotten something, how about you maybe if your husband, comes with you? In fact, he came with the conclusion. He sort of said, well, I'll come with you when you go for something, because I'll remember it when you get there. And she was like, oh, will you? Oh, that's lovely. Oh, and I'll have my shoulder to cry on again. And she was just so overwhelmed by this simple little thing. He said, well, I can do that. I can get off the sofa, and walk to the drawers with her, and we can find whatever she's after. And so that was really, 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 really useful. I didn't blind people with science. I'm not a doctor. And it was just about, more about the practicalities and the emotional and, the side of things, really, that we focused on to try and equip people to live well with it.
Well, I think so many times in the industry we are doling out processes of, go to A to B to C to D, but we don't talk about the emotions that you might feel in that process. And when you just engage that, it changes not only the conversation, but the outcomes. And I think it's so empowering because it becomes real, because a lot of times I don't think we understand how our process, or our task is making someone feel, because we're so caught up with just getting it done. We just want to get her done. I remember with my dad, and I'll never forget this, and he didn't have dementia, he had brain cancer though. And we were traveling, and I packed this big heavy bag, and he couldn't pull it. And so, of course, I'm, doing the luggage and things like that. And I didn't realize how sad that made him feel. It was almost emasculating. And I could have easily packed different, but I had no idea that would make him feel bad. I was just a daughter wanting to help. And how that was taken away. And it was just like, oh, it just made me feel horrible. And it was like, okay, from now on, we're going to pack different, and there'll be some smaller bags so everybody can participate. And, it was just, I guess, dumb on my part, but I was too busy trying to figure out how to move through the process quickly.
Yeah.
That I wasn't
brilliant
thinking.
that you spotted that. It was brilliant that you spotted that, and you realised the impact of it straight away. And I think that's what getting long was having that sort of objective eye, maybe just to help people see some of those things, you know.
Yeah.
And identity and all that sort of loss of role was something we look at. And I asked one chap to describe, you know, how would you describe yourself? And he was a cabinet maker. He'd made this beautiful furniture, which is all around this room that he was sat in. And you know, I said, how would you describe yourself? He says, "Oh, I'm a hard-working master craftsman." And his wife just burst out laughing. She says, "You never get off your fat backside all day, sat in that big sofa." and I was able just to say, is it that you believe in the work ethic, that although you've stopped the hard work, it's still what's got you where you are today, and it's been very much part of you, and you still see that as your identity? He says, "Yes, absolutely, that's what it is." So it's just enabling him to be seen as he wanted to be seen, and you know, that helped as well, you know.
Yeah, well, especially when you've got all those beautiful pieces around you, you know, and I don't think any of us want to lose any part of ourselves, you know, especially that which we're proud of, you know, because we can't do it anymore. We always, I think that's just very normal for us to consider that a part of us, you know, and we just have to get other people to understand the importance of that. I think there's so much inner looking that needs to be done, you know, when it comes to things, getting people to look at, you know, the triggers of what's causing the behaviors that we don't like. And, you know, here in the US, I try to get people not to use the word behavior. Because it's blaming, it's shaming, it's all of that stuff, and it's just a reaction. And we all have reactions, but they become behaviors when they don't fit the other person's mode, you know. Exactly. Then it's a problem, you know, and it's not about us, it's about them, you know. And so getting people to understand that we all use the same equation for how we react, you know, to me, when I go out and speak, has just been an eye-opener for people, just telling them that, you know, we all come into a room or a situation with an attitude. We all have our own unique past experiences, and that is going to create our perception, and our perception is then going to trigger our reaction. And we all use that equation, no matter who we are, no matter where we are in life. And we really are the same. And so if we're not liking the outcome, we got to back it up and figure out what's triggering it, because there's usually a logical mode behind that. And but we don't teach that. We don't talk about that. We just categorize it, you know, and try to make everybody fit our little world. And you know, as everyone always says, you know, we need to enter the world of dementia. And that's such a gift to care partners to learn to be able to look at it different, to say, yeah, my world isn't the way it used to be, but I also have to enter their world. And there can be so much joy and happiness and peacefulness. And some people with dementia, I don't know if you've heard them say that, but I hear it a lot. They feel in some ways more peaceful now because they don't feel that they have to meet certain standards all the time. I mean, some do, depending on where they are in the disease. But after a while, people are like, that's just not that important anymore. What I thought was really important and which caused me a lot of stress, you know, they've released. And you know, they know the importance of and the joy in the moment, and the value of that.
And many people we meet find even a new lease of life. Of dementia. You know, if they have a positive experience meeting peers, we operate this network of peer support groups across the UK. You know, and many people are saying, you know, my life has changed. My social life's never been so busy. And obviously, you know, and I suppose our whole outlook is that although dementia, you know, can be life changing, it's not necessarily life ending. And you know, that's really our message, is to, in everything we do, is to promote that, really, in that sense of rights of everyone to continue to be citizens, to belong, to have a voice and choice and control like anyone else.
Yep. Very, very important. Well, and I think, I don't know about the doctors over there, but the doctors here kind of give a death sentence, to people upon diagnosis. Get your affairs in order, no resources. They might get a prescription, and they always get another appointment to come back, but that's about it. So they walk out kind of in this doom and gloom fog. And then when there's people like you and myself trying to connect to them, and they're just shocked at the support that is out there. And when you guys connect people in these groups, is it virtually or is it physical support groups, networking groups, or both?
The network groups, they're all physical. Nation, there's about 90 groups now nationwide, UK wide, so it's really mushrooming really, the number of groups, and the new ones being created all the time. So people are getting, and they're becoming almost part of the system now, where people are being referred, hopefully, to these groups. There needs to be a lot more of that. But because there's a growing network, an expanding network, people get more and more opportunities, hopefully, to have a voice and to have a place where they can meet and encounter safely and in a good-humoured community, if you want. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And are the networking groups just for the people with dementia, or are they for them and a care partner?
The deep groups that are groups for people living with dementia, and obviously sometimes care partners will come along to accompany, but the group is principally for people with dementia to share experiences, to have a voice, to influence policy, local, nationally, internationally as well, in terms of the rights agenda, in terms of the sort of national strategies of the governments over here. So people are getting a say. There are an awful lot of there's also a network of care partners as well established. So the deep was very much, I suppose, there was a gap there really, and that's hopefully beginning to be filled. So yeah, but they are groups for people living with dementia.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we don't have as many of those. They call them meetups, for people with dementia, yes. But they still, I don't think, have taken off as much as we'd like to see, them. And our memory cafe concepts, there's probably, I would say, 330 of those or so now in the U.S. Still not as many as we'd like to see. And, that's expanding. And there's so much of a grassroots effort. Our government isn't really supporting those financially and stuff. So sometimes they're a little bit harder to track. There's probably more out there than we know of with that. And so we find here, and through Facebook and some of those groups, that there's more and more networking going on. We have something called Dementia Mentors. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No.
Well, that's a really cool concept. That is, people with dementia are mentoring people newly diagnosed, and they do it via Zoom. Just like this. And that's a really been extremely beneficial, because
there are examples of that here as well. Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Now, getting back to your Getting Along program, sure. Is that something that can be introduced here over in the U.S.?
I'd love it to be.
Okay, so what would the process be if someone is interested in getting involved in that? What would it take? What's the cost? And
well, what we're doing over here is that maybe a local authority or local charity will contact us, and I'll go and give a day's facilitated training program. Okay. So it's a day to hopefully help equip people to then run programs, or certainly to adopt a more of a getting along approach across their services or across their sort of communities. So you can, promote formal programs, but also, promote a relationship-centered approach right across the board. So I'd go in, do a facilitators program, but also help maybe shadow initial programs. So, there's various options and costs.
Okay.
involved in that, obviously, in terms of my time and not being salaried and stuff. So we go out, we cost for our time, and depending where it is, obviously travel expenses, and obviously a couple of days doing the training and doing some shadowing for a program, and helping, and then that'll be the one-off. And hopefully, the idea is that it's not something people add to their current services, but it's something that enhances or changes maybe perhaps outmoded practices, I suppose. You say that those rigid systems, it's about trying to introduce a bit more flexibility in those, really.
Yep, which can be difficult sometimes to get those lines to move there. When you go into facilities, what type of facilities are you talking? Are you talking memory care, assisted living? And you probably have different names too than
say working with sort of the health side, the community mental health team, so the people running memory clinics and monitoring. So we've got a very heavily medicalized approach, really. Community mental health nurses and consultants go through that. People go through that diagnostic process, and there is that. I suppose people are looking to create these pathways, but as you said before, these rigid systems. Who's going to follow a logical pathway? Everyone's unique, and there's a real gap. But so working with hopefully community teams or with local charities, sort of Alzheimer's charities who cover a region, provide some services, daycare, respite, dementia cafes, support and information. And if they've got community-based workers, we work with them to see if they can then, start a program locally.
Okay.
We're just starting really to try to start to build up an evidence base for the efficacy. The few programs I've done have worked really well and have had a really positive response from the participants, and it's about trying to get that on a bigger scale now.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if you had any research behind it, or people are always asking for that, and sometimes people will use an intern or someone going for their doctorate to come in and do a paper or something.
That's what we're looking for. So the next time we run the program is just so we're putting in bids for small pots of money to be able to run a program and to have that evaluated. So we're looking for small programs evaluated, but also looking for larger pots to maybe have a larger scale study, over a region in the UK. So we're sort of got our fingers crossed really for all those elements, because we need people often look, where's the hard evidence? Evidence comes in many forms, and I think the evidence of the people on the film saying the impact, and the idea of the getting along is to equip people themselves. They come up with their own solutions, tips, maybe plans if they want to, but they're theirs, they own them, and they own the new approach, and they carry that forward, and they see each other hopefully in a new light. And that's, for me, that's a great satisfaction. But we need to gather that evidence, and that people like.
Okay. And so with the program, is it always a couple one-on-one, or do you get them together as a group of
what
couples?
I tend to do with the programs I've run is that at the end of each couple going through the sort of 4 sessions, we invite them all to come together.
Okay.
And that's been quite powerful in the past as well. I remember there were 3 couples came to one session. They'd all been through the program, and at the end of the session, one carer rang me up and said, "Oh, I'm glad I'm not in their position." And then that other carer said, "Well, I'm glad I'm not in their position." And the third carer said, "Oh, I'm glad I'm not in the other person's position." So there was an element of giving people that, almost there's always someone worse off than yourself in a way. So that helped individuals. But there was also great, powerful contributions from people living with dementia. So one chap said in a group, he said, "I know it's always my fault." And another lady who had actually been admitted to long-term care during the process, she stood up and she said, "No, we must be allowed to make mistakes." So she made a compelling contribution.
Wow.
I said that from a theoretical, but from coming from someone living the experience, that was really, really powerful.
Yeah.
So we do try to get the groups together as well.
Well, and it's so interesting that statement even has to be made. That, okay, none of us are perfect. We all know that to begin with. And now someone's got a disease, and now we expect perfection.
Yeah.
How, I mean, when you state that, then it's just like, how silly is that? How did we get there?
Yeah.
Well, this has just been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Are you looking at writing a book at all regarding this at all, or?
There's an awful lot of work to go in writing a book, but I'm trying to with other things going on. But I'd really like to. I've done a lot of writing on my blog around various aspects around that, and often it's stemmed from the connections with couples with any caregiving relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots there. But yeah, I'd like to write a book one day,
Mm-hmm.
get that out there and see. But yeah, if people want to invite me over to the US, I'm happy to.
Okay.
Come out and see.
We'll push it out and see what happens, because it just
go.
sounds really like it's just a fantastic concept. The issue I think here will be, we don't have the mental health nurses. We've got like the block nurses here, but funding isn't real high, for that, and they're all kind of their own separate little things. So cost might end up being a factor, with all of that. Now, is your blog? Can people get that through your website?
Not my website, but it's dementiafriendly.wordpress.com.
Okay, just a second. I want to write that down. dementiafriendly.wordpress.com.
That's what I think it is. Yeah.
Okay, and then I've got down for your website is innovationsindementia.org.uk.
That's correct, yeah. And that's just being upgraded now, so it'll be all singing, all dancing very, very soon.
Oh, cool. And then you also have a Twitter handle.
Yes.
And that is ELHIJODEVERA.
El Hijo de Vera.
Okay.
The son of Vera.
What was that?
The son of Vera.
The son of Vera. Okay.
That's me mum.
Oh, that's cool. And then they can get you also at your email at Damian@innovationsindementia.uk, .org.uk.
Yes.
And okay, sounds good. And well, like I said, this has just been a great conversation, and I really urge people to watch the video and reach out to Damian. Bring him over to the U.S.
Thank you very much, Laurie.
Thank you so much for your time.
It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Hey everybody, Jared Sebesta here, host of Retire Repurposed. Now, this podcast is about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. We believe retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.